Joining me in studio right now, the former U.S. Attorney General for the United States. It's the Honorable Alberto Gonzales. Welcome back to Lubbock.
It's great to be back in Lubbock. Well, I'm here with my wife, Rebecca, and we're so pleased to be back and see so many good friends.
Well, it's good to have you back. I know you're going to be speaking this evening at the Lubbock Women's Club, correct?
That's correct. I've got a book out called True Faith and Allegiance, and part of this visit is to promote the book, and so I'm looking forward to tonight's event. I'm also speaking to a veterans group at lunch and going out seeing some high school kids after this interview, and so I'm really looking forward to seeing as many folks here in Lubbock as possible.
That's great. Tell our listeners, before we get into some of the events happening in the world right now, tell our listeners about the book and what made you decide. I know you've written other books. What was it about this book that you wanted to get a message out about?
Well, a lot has been written about the Bush administration, the policies of the Bush administration, some of it incomplete, some of it accurate. And I wanted to get my voice into the mix. Primarily, the book was written for my sons. I want them to know what their dad did and the reasons, the motivation behind some of the decisions and some of the actions that we took. And it's a story of my life, beginning with my early days in Texas and my service in Austin, my service in D.C., and what we're doing today. I currently am the dean at Belmont Law School in Nashville. So it's a story of my life and the things that are important to me, my faith that's important, and my relationships with my family, my relationship with George W. Bush. And so it's just a story that I felt important for the nation to know about, but primarily for my sons to hear.
Looking back at your time as Attorney General and during the Bush administration, what do you think some of the more important decisions that came through your office, what do you think some of the most important decisions were?
Well, clearly and obviously the decisions related to the war on terrorism. We faced a new kind of enemy, a new kind of threat. Many of the legal issues we wrestled with as lawyers we'd never had to deal with before, some not since World War II. And so working with a number of very talented, dedicated lawyers throughout the administration, I'm very proud of the decisions that we made, the opinions that we offered to the policymakers. So those, to me, stand out as the most consequential.
Does the public have presidents, including President Bush, President Obama, now President Trump? And President Trump is so new into this, less than 100 days. Maybe he's left out of this discussion for now. But if presidents communicated with the public enough about terrorism and the steps that we have taken or that the government has taken to protect this country, do you think enough communication has happened? Because there are a lot of controversial decisions that have been made in order to protect the country.
That's always a challenge for an administration, how much information to provide, because not only are the American citizens listening, but our enemies are listening as well. And so obviously you want to protect certain sources and methods that help keep America safe. But it is important, particularly when you're going to be doing controversial things, that you inform the public, you educate the public about the necessity, you educate the public about the legal basis for the decisions that you're making. So that is critically important if you want to maintain the support of the American public, which is very important, particularly in a time of crisis. So that's a challenge for every administration. President Trump will have the same kind of challenge. So the policy making is important, but also the communication of that policy to the American people and to our allies around the world, but also to our enemies. We have messages we want delivered. We have to be clear in our intentions. Our enemies need to understand, okay, what are the ramifications? What is the United States? How is the United States going to respond if we do this? That kind of communication is likewise very important.
We're visiting with former U.S. Attorney General Alberto Gonzales here on the Chad Hasty Show. Obviously, there were a lot of decisions made during the Bush presidency that came under fire from both the left and the right. It's going to happen in every administration. There were decisions that you had to defend that were controversial. I want to ask you about this temporary travel ban that President Trump has come out with that affects, 6 to 8 countries, I believe. There are a lot of folks who are for it, a lot of folks who are against it. You've had court decisions come out against it, say that it's not constitutional, that the president can't do this. Obviously, Attorney General Sessions is going to have to defend this issue. If you were Attorney General and looking at this, do you think it's legal? Do you think what the president did was legal? And do you think that the current Attorney General will have an easy time defending it?
Well, first of all, let's always remember that we don't know what we don't know. So there's always more information that the president's going to have, the Attorney General's going to have than you and I have sitting here this morning. So it would be helpful to have that kind of information. But looking at it, it seems to me that as a judge, I would have a hard time ignoring the public pronouncement of the Attorney General, the Secretary of Homeland Security, and the Secretary of State, who have all said, this we have to do to protect the national security of our country. Who am I as a judge to second guess that? And I know President Trump has made comments during the campaign that judges have latched onto as saying, well, you really intend this to be a Muslim ban. Well, things are said all the time in a campaign. And so I think once the merits of this executive order is examined by the courts, if it goes up to the Supreme Court, which I suspect it very well may, as a judge, it's going to be very, very hard to second guess the public pronouncements of these individuals who have so much more information than a judge does about the dangers to our country. And then I would really discount comments made during a presidential campaign because things are said all the time.
It's a campaign.
It's a campaign, and particularly, and this is not meant as a negative comment, but particularly Trump is prone to make comments and that you look back and say, well, that's just not true or didn't mean that, and so I would bet money that the United States government would win on this case, but yet I've been wrong several times before about decisions by the U.S. Supreme Court. But my own judgment tells me that in the end, the government's probably going to win this case.
Is this with the judges who have come in and said no, this is unconstitutional, you can't do this? Is that politics playing a role?
No, I hope it's not. I'd like to think it's not politics because I'd like to think that presidents put people into the federal bench that put politics aside. The good ones can do that. Obviously, we're all products of our experiences. We all have biases, but good judges understand that. They appreciate that. They recognize that, and they consciously can put those aside and limit those biases to the greatest possible extent. So I'd like to think that these judges who have ruled against the administration, that wasn't based upon politics, and yet we're all human beings and human nature. We are affected by what we read and what we hear. And so, hopefully, obviously the hope of the administration is as this case goes further up the chain, that they're going to prevail.
When we come back, we'll have one more segment with former U.S. Attorney General Alberto Gonzales, his book, True Faith and Allegiance. You can get it at your favorite bookstore, also on Amazon.com and other places as well. We'll be right back with the Honorable Alberto Gonzales here on the Chad Hasty Show. All right, welcome back to the Chad Hasty Show on News Talk 95.1 FM and 790 AM KFYO. We continue our conversation with the former U.S. Attorney General Alberto Gonzales, who will be speaking this evening at the Lubbock Women's Club. He'll also have some other speaking engagements today, going around and meeting with some folks. His book is out where you can purchase it either at Amazon.com, numerous bookstores. The book called True Faith and Allegiance, Story of Service and Sacrifice in War and Peace. You look at politics these days. How different is the political world mixing into the legal world today than it was when you were Attorney General?
Well, it was pretty controversial, certainly in the years following 9/11. Politics got involved, and that's just the nature of the way things are in Washington. We're seeing it play out more and more, I think, in state and local governments today. I think most people would say it does seem to be heightened. The division within our country seems greater today than in the past. And I think that that is a function of several things. There's frustration about what appears to be the inability of Congress to get things done, although most people forget that the founding fathers, I think, envisioned checks and balances to limit the ability of the federal government to do things. But I think also there's been a failure of leadership, both in the White House and the Senate and House. In order to get things done, you've got to be willing to compromise. So that means, of course, that we as citizens, the voters, are partly to blame for some of the stalemate because we put people in office from safe districts who we expect to do certain things, and if they don't, we vote them out of office. And so, it's a combination of things that exist today. But I'm a little bit worried about the division that exists because it's very important that we work together and that we work to compromise on the big issues that we need to get solved at the federal level.
You wrote a piece for The Hill a couple of weeks ago, and this was about now Justice Gorsuch, who was confirmed. What did you think about using the nuclear option or the so-called nuclear option to get him confirmed? And is it possible in 2017 and beyond? Because your headline was "Keep Politics Out of the Supreme Court." Is that possible?
Well, probably for some people it will not be possible, but I think the reason why people now look at the court as a battleground to get policies enacted is because of the frustration and the stalemate in Congress. And so they now naturally, okay, if we can't get it done in Congress through a law, we're going to, hopefully we'll get it done through the courts. I think that obviously politics played a big role in the Gorsuch confirmation. I regretted the fact that the nuclear option was employed, particularly on a candidate like Neil, who I know well, worked for me at the Department of Justice, and particularly filling the Scalia seat. So it didn't change the balance on the court. As we've all heard the experts talk about this, the next battleground will be the really important one if someone like Justice Ginsburg, Justice Breyer retire, and President Trump has the opportunity to fill that seat. That will fundamentally transform the direction of the court, in my judgment. And I think that's when I would have expected the nuclear option to be employed. As a general matter, Republicans are not always going to control the Senate, and there's going to come a time when you have a Democratic president, a Democratic-led Senate, and they're going to be able to put in place people of their political persuasion and more liberal thinking, leaning justices. And at that point, we're going to regret the change that we saw happen with Neil Gorsuch.
When it comes to sanctuary cities, the current Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, and this administration looks like they're going to go hard after sanctuary cities. What can, in your opinion, what can an administration do? What can the Attorney General's office do when it comes to sanctuary cities?
Well, the Attorney General, the Department of Justice issues millions of dollars of grants to state and local authorities. We do that in part to curry favor because we need their cooperation. The department needs their cooperation in dealing with some of the major issues that exist, law enforcement issues that exist in this country. I, for one, listen, if a local community wants to declare themselves a sanctuary city, I have no problem with that. And I believe in local control, but I do have a problem in you taking federal money if you do that. If you're not going to help us deal with the serious issue of immigration at all, then fine, that's your choice, but we get to make the choice of not making monies available to you. I think that will be sustained when it comes to that. And so I have no issue at all with what a city or community wants to do. I do have an issue, though, if by that they means they turn their backs on the federal government and the federal government can't do its job as effectively, in which case I would say then you get no federal dollars. I have no problem with that at all.
Do you think that there will be and we'll get into the political world here a little bit with former U.S. Attorney General Alberto Gonzales? What do you think about the idea of a wall across the border?
I have two thoughts about it. First of all, in a post 9/11 world, we need to know who's in this country and why. We need a secure border, no question about that. I think we can have a secure border without a 3,000-mile wall, quite frankly. I think we can have a more secure border with additional fencing, some wall, taking advantage of the natural terrain in certain areas, taking advantage of technology like drones and motion detectors. So I don't know that we need that wall. In addition, half the people that are here today came here lawfully through a visa, which have now expired. They're overstaying their visa. So a wall wouldn't have stopped that problem. Mm-hmm. Having said all that, the President Trump campaigned on building a wall. He aims to keep his promise. You have to admire that. I mean, he told the American people, this is what I want to do, and they elected him president of the United States. So, I'm not surprised that this is what he's pursuing, and quite frankly, you have to admire the fact that he's trying to keep this promise to the American people, the people that voted for him. But as a general matter, I think we can have a secure border. We can deal with this issue without having to spend the billions of dollars that will be necessary to build a 3,000-mile wall.
How tricky? There's so many investigations that are going on in Washington right now with Russia and the Trump administration. I believe Attorney General Sessions is going to recuse himself from those proceedings. In the Justice Department, how difficult would it be right now? How difficult do you think it is in the Justice Department?
It's always difficult. The department is always going to be involved in the most controversial decisions. The AG is oftentimes a lightning rod. And there are always winners and losers when the department takes a position and goes to court. And so it's not surprising at all that it can be tough. But the corollary to that is also extremely rewarding to be involved in those kinds of issues of consequence. They're very important. And it's a big deal to be involved in these decisions and provide these kinds of opinions. So, at the same time, you feel that tension, you feel that pressure, but it's also exhilarating to know I am making a difference. This is a big deal. What I'm working on is important for the American people, for the administration of justice, for the United States of America. So that lifts your spirits up anytime you get a little tired or weary from all the pressure. Well,
when you were Attorney General, how long was it before you had the Justice Department? There was a story that came out that there aren't any U.S. attorneys that are hired. How long did it take for your Justice Department to get up to speed on everything? And I don't want to say get fully staffed, because I don't know if you're ever fully staffed at the Justice Department, but to get up to speed and go. How big of a story is that?
There are 105,000 people that work at the department. Less than 1% are political appointees. Less than 1%. I think there are about 400 political appointees. The department can operate entirely on its own without political leadership. It was intended to be that way. So obviously, the president has law enforcement priorities that he has. The attorney general has law enforcement priorities, and so try to get as many of those implemented and moved forward as possible. But you want to get your people in place as soon as possible. Sometimes it takes more time than you'd like, and that certainly appears to be the case here. But I think the American people should be reassured the administration of justice will be achieved even without these political appointees. You have an attorney general in place now, and his job will be to make sure that happens.
Former U.S. Attorney General Alberto Gonzales, thank you for your time.
Thank you for having me.